Thank you so much for joining us today. So I'm Piali. I work as the program manager at the Ending Violence Against Women's Unit at UN Women India Country Office. So on behalf of UN Women India Country Office and IIT Delhi, I welcome you to our panel discussion, which is Fireside Chat, Conversations on Online Gender-Based Violence. This event is part of one of our outgoing campaigns and activities, which is part of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. So if any of you know about 16 days, this is for the benefit of the people who doesn't know what 16 days of activism is. This is a campaign. It's an internationally civil society-led campaign that takes place in every year. It starts on the 25th of November, which is the day of the International Day of the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and it ends on 10th December, which is the Human Rights Day. See, for all the 16 days globally as well as in India, we do a lot of civil society organizations, UN organizations, academic organizations like IIT organize events to raise awareness about issues which is related to gender-based violence. And as we have seen during pandemic, one of the things which has really come up is a new site of violence, and because all of you are students of technology, I think this would be of interest to you, which is online violence. So this is our panel discussion will be primarily based on how ICT-based technology or how the site of technology is often used as a site of violence. So I would first call the moderator of the panel to join us. So today's discussion will approach the problem from a social and legal lens, weaving in lived experiences, latest research and legal intervention. It would be moderated by Dr. Paulomi Paul, who is the program specialist of the Ending Violence Against Women unit at UN Women India office. She is a Nehru Fulbright postdoctoral gender studies scholar. She has over 17 years of experience in the development sector. Her work has been in the intersections of issues related to gender and gender-based violence, women and war. She has a range of issues, worked with a range of issues including women and war, intimate partner violence, domestic violence, technology facilitated online violence, and violence. Sorry, it's a long list for me of your work.
That's all right.
And violence faced by lesbian, bisexuals and transgenders in forced marriages as well as child marriage issues. I would now request Paulomi to introduce the panel and get the discussion started. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you so much, Piali. Before I start, I really wanted us to see the film which has been made as part of our 16 days activism campaign. So yeah, after the film, please.
Today, we come together to end gender-based violence. We pledge not to hide behind silence, nor avert our gaze and walk away, and pretend it doesn't exist. It's our time to rise up against inaction and stop gender-based violence together. We pledge to be present and not be mute observers, invisible bystanders to violence faced, seen, heard, and felt, not even once. We pledge to step up and speak up, to stop blaming the survivor, and start building a world of safety, consent, and trust. Because there is simply no excuse for gender-based violence. Domestic violence, घरेलू हिंसा, intimate partner violence, संबंधी से हिंसा, sexual harassment at workplace, काम काज की जगह हिंसा, छेड़छाड़, online violence, stalking, teasing, सब. Gender-based violence is everyone's business. And if we don't take a collective stand, who will? अब हिंसा को नजरअंदाज करना बंद. अब वक्त है हिंसा पे धावा बोलने का. अब वक्त है हिंसा को खत्म करने का. उठाएं हाथ और शपथ लें. हिंसा का नामो निशान नहीं रखेंगे कहीं. Today we join hands to break the chain of gender-based violence. महिलाओं और लड़कियों के खिलाफ हो रही हिंसा को खत्म करने के लिए. Take the pledge to build a gender-equal world. बस अब कोई बहाना नहीं.
Welcome everybody to this Fireside chat. I would like to call upon. Sorry for that. That's okay. Yeah. So I would like to call upon our esteemed panelists today. So first we have Julie Thekodan, who is a South Asian consultant with Equality Now. She's a women's rights and gender justice practitioner from India, over 17 years of experience in national and international government agencies. She has led and contributed to programmatic and influential work on gender justice in countries of Global South. I will now request Julie to also talk about other things, like if she wants to add some more to her experience. But before that, I will call the other panelist, Miss Malavika Rajkumar, and she's a project associate with IT for Change. She works on the intersections of social media governance, digital justice, and the law. Her main areas of research include platform accountability, social media regulatory governance, women's rights, gender-based violence, and information design. We also have Neova Paul. She's an IIT student, a PhD student. We are really happy to have her in the panel. She's a doctoral student in the Department of Chemistry with a focus on biophysics. She is a core student member of IGES, Initiative for Gender Equality and Sensitization here at IIT Delhi. We also have Vrinda Bhandari, who is going to join us in a bit. She's an advocate on records with Supreme Court of India. She has worked on a variety of digital rights and privacy issues. And she's also of counsel for Internet Freedom Foundation and empaneled lawyer with the Delhi High Court Legal Aid Society. So yeah, so welcome and thank you everybody to have joined this panel with all of us. So before I open up, the conversations, looking at the time, we feel that, we'll do a round of questions and give you 5 to 7 minutes to respond to that. Then we will take maybe 3, 4 questions from the audience, and we would like to end this by 4:30 or so. That's what we are thinking, a little before time. So before I open up to the panel, just wanted to highlight 2-3 major things in terms of technology facilitated gender-based violence. One of research and statistics actually show that there is a growing link between physical violence which women face and the online violence which they face in the online sphere. So it's important to know the interlinkages between that. At UN Women, we work on all spheres of violence within the household, at public spaces, at workplaces, also on online spaces and the interconnectedness with that. But today we have actually come here to discuss a very important issue, and there are glaring global statistics. For instance, Before I come to the statistics, I wanted to also mention that this is an issue for women and girls who have access to technology. So there is globally there are around 2.9 billion people who remain unconnected to the internet. So we are talking about the population who are not these. We need to understand when we are talking about, the discourse or the issues around online violence, there are specific, women and girls are not a homogeneous group. So there are specific groups who are targeted, human rights defenders, for instance, journalists, lawmakers, politicians. There are global studies which are also talking about these. And globally, we have one study which we kind of go by, and it says that 58% of young girls and women have faced some sort of online violence. That's a big statistics. And also 85% of women who have spent time online have witnessed digital violence. So, so for you, Julie, I wanted to start with you. So when you look at the global statistics, what are some of the issues like you can think of globally which really resonates with the region and with India? What are those issues? Thank you.
Thanks for me and thank you for inviting me to talk about something that is so pertinent to all of us, at least, who are connected to the net. I think what the research is really showing is that online or tech-facilitated gender-based violence, or GBV, is what I will call it in short, and I sometimes interchange with online sexual exploitation and abuse as well. It is actually a global concern, and I will share some data points later on. And as Paulomi said, it is a replication often of the existing structural gender inequalities that exist in the actual world outside, and that gets amplified in the digital spaces. And of course, those who face other intersecting inequalities, they too tend to face, they are at much higher risk of facing gender-based violence online. So the evidence has shown that like black women or black women, those who are poor, those who face disability, they are at further risk. And the evidence has also shown that members of the LGBTQI community, including transgender, gender diverse people, men and boys who do not conform to existing patriarchal gender norms, they tend to face a lot more online gender-based violence. But the data that you find is not as much as you would find for women and girls. And I think with, let's face it, internet connectivity and anonymity with regard to encryption and a focus on privacy rather than on safety, what is happening is that the older forms of GBV are increasing much more and newer forms of violence are coming about. I did say that I would share some data. There was a global survey in 45 countries which found that 38% of surveyed women reported personal experiences of online violence. 18% of young people worldwide have had a sexual image shared by a peer without consent. There is a very large market, and I'm putting market within quotes, for online sexual abuse of children. The data that shows is that 750,000 people are looking for child sexual abuse material online at any given moment. In India, if you see data that has been compiled by the India Child Protection Fund shows that there's been a 95% increase in the child sexual abuse material consumption. And in addition to that, you have about a 200% spike in searches for videos showing children bleeding, choking, tortured or in pain compared to the same time before the pandemic. In the US, you have about 60,000 reports of child sexual abuse online. that are being processed by the US National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So it is a very pertinent issue to deal with. One of the other issues that I would say is that, again, as you said, that the connectivity to the internet is obviously not as high as we think it is, but maybe it is not as low also as we think it is, because more and more women, younger girls are connected to internet, and I think pandemic kind of really boosted it up, because classes were being held online. You needed smartphones are becoming much cheaper. There are so many packages where you do have free internet, and so the idea is that there are people who are connected to the net in that sense. But what is happening is that when it comes to technologies, and particularly artificial intelligence that's happening, that's really a big topic right now, you have women who are underrepresented in the design, in the application and the governance of digital technologies and the content that they disseminate. So if you look at the AI industry, only 1/5 of the workforce there is women. And also those who are generating content for Wikipedia, about 90% of them identify as men. So obviously women are missing in this field. And so what is happening is that they provide less data, and it leads to an imbalanced data set that is being used to train machines. And therefore what is happening is that the algorithms that are being developed are mostly gender biased, or have a propensity to be gender biased, and they kind of perpetuate gender-based discrimination. So it is a growing area of concern for everybody. I can talk about it a little bit more, but maybe you have more questions. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. There are lots to discuss based on what you've shared, but I would like, for Malvika to go next. And we were actually reading these very interesting, knowledge products which have been developed by IT for Change. And there are resources, on survivor-centric approaches to online violence, online GBV, and also empirical analysis of GBV based on your research. So we really wanted to know some of the findings specific to online violence from a survivor-centric lens, and what were some of the recommendations of your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, it's good to be here. I think most of us can come to terms with the fact that there are new social mores out there now, with the way digital society has been transformed and social interactions have transformed. And I think the sort of pervasiveness of online violence is something most of us see and face, and I think more than anything, personally even I have a sort of threshold for it now. Sometimes I think, okay, this is doable, this is fine, but it is not. And that is where we start with most of our, at ID for Change, and most organizations start their digital security trainings, for instance. But particularly today I'd like to talk about the report that we did, which is an empirical study where we looked at around, initially in our first data set, we looked at around 400 cases from the open source platform Indian Qanun. What we wanted to see was what the judiciary was doing when they got these online violence cases. Did they see them as online violence cases? How did they go into court? Was it recorded under the Indian Penal Code, or was it under the Information Technology Act? We were just very curious. Our questions were very simple to start, but I think the findings, some of them we already knew, because some of these inherent patriarchal systems exist within judicial institutions. But particularly the sort of social dynamic that we found for online violence, for all the survivors coming to court, that was, I think, useful, because we were able to put that into a capacity building toolkit for the judiciary later. So we had 5 findings out of this. First was that most of the courts and most of the cases, when it finally went to the courts, they had a very limited understanding of online violence. Because there are so many different kinds, even in the pamphlets I was reading these different terms, most Indian laws don't really recognize most of these terms to start. So, for instance, if we take an instance of like one of the cases we had, girlfriend shares a picture with the boyfriend, boyfriend distributes it with his friends, friends upload it onto xvideos.com, which is a porn site. The survivor finally goes to court. The court doesn't know what to do because this includes an order would include de-indexing the search engines, calling the platforms. There's a lot of work to take down content, and this is just one case. So apart from this, we saw a lot of cases registered as criminal intimidation, or as we call it, blackmail cases. So I refer to these cases as non-consensual intimate image distribution, NCIID, because there is no question of consent when it is uploaded, when it is shared, and it's very important because that aspect of consent is not recognized in court. What all they see is that, oh, is a married woman sharing it? What is the status of the woman? The occupation of the woman? Does she have children? These are the details that courts go into, and sometimes you sort of get lost in that sphere. So this is one thing, and the online-offline continuum is real. Something that starts online can move offline, or something that starts offline. For instance, in one of our cases, a woman went out with her colleagues for a drink, her drink got spiked, the pictures were taken, it was uploaded online, and then she was blackmailed at work. Again, it's circular, and courts find it very hard to grasp the fact that there is a linkage and that it is not a separate offense. So most of the time, what we saw was that the focus was on the offline provisions. So if there was let's say a rape had happened, for instance, they were just focused on that. The distribution of the image, what happened to that never came into question. Apart from this, privacy is, I think after the Puttaswamy decision that came out, privacy has become a token word in most courts, but it has, the usage of it has increased though substantially, that's one of our findings. But what is privacy? There's informational privacy, there's decisional privacy. None of that is really discussed in detail. Then one of our other findings was that most of the bail orders that are there, they're very contextual to physical violence. So they tell someone, don't contact the accused, don't contact the survivor. But it's not contextual to the online public sphere. So if there was stalking that happened on Facebook, there was the bail orders were quite generic for that matter. And finally, I think the patriarchal notion in most of these court orders, where you have the virtue of a woman, which is her modesty, being discussed repeatedly even today. Aspects of bringing in the fact that a married woman had an affair and then the blackmail happened, that was taken into consideration. And sometimes even bail is a matter of right, but there is a little influence of these patriarchal notions while granting bail. And I think Vrinda can also speak to some of her experience here in courts. But these were mostly the findings that we had, and yeah, happy to discuss more. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So one of the things which have it's very interesting, this online offline thing. Also at this point I wanted to really for the audience mention that there's a lot of research on what is the correct terminology. Is it technology facilitated GBV? Is it online violence? Is it ICT facilitated violence? And I think there isn't a consensus, but at the same time it's important to note that there are reasons for why people are going by certain set definitions. Also, a lot of types of violence, for instance, cyberbullying, defamation, sexual harassment online, cyber stalking, online exploitation, cyber grooming, hate speech, doxing, And of course, non-consensual distribution of images, like you mentioned, gender trolling. So we, for instance, have a pamphlet which we are very happy to distribute, and maybe we can put it online for colleagues who've joined online for their understanding. But over to Vrinda, we're very happy you could join, and if we could have our team please post the background on the panelist online also. So for Vrinda, my question to you is that you are from the legal field, and share with us, because it is a kind of violence which is very difficult to really pinpoint the perpetrator. How difficult it is in court. How are our legislations? Are they supportive? What are some of the issues and challenges, and what needs to be done? Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, really sorry for being late. I got stuck in court. But I think in terms of, you know, how, where does the problem lie, and, how supportive is the legal system, I think the first problem is that people, and sort of heard me say this before, but people don't reach the legal system. I mean, I think many people here may have experienced some sort of trolling, or abuse on Twitter or any sort of social media platform, or in sort of some virtual space, and many of us just dismiss it as this is just the price of being a woman online, because it is so difficult to file a complaint. You have to actually take up the issue. It becomes more formal. You go to the police. If it's a criminal complaint, especially, you have to go to the police. The police are very dismissive. First, they'll be like, "Oh, why are you posting this?" Or in some cases, if it's a case of you sending some nude selfies to your partner who then shares it, right? They'll be like, "Oh, there's a lot of shame that gets associated with it wrongly, because it's like you have to then show those images to the police. You don't know what the police is going to say. Often they're very dismissive. Often they're very critical. Aaj ki ladkiyan sort of situation. So I think the issue really is at that level, and it's the lack of support you also get to have and file a complaint. Like many people, they don't even know how to articulate it, right? Like in what sections do you put? You don't want to spend money on getting a lawyer at this stage. Like it seems like a lot of expense for something you're not sure where it's going to go. And so then you don't have a lawyer, you go to the police will not register an FIR. There are also all these incentives that work on police, right? Like nobody wants to have a rising crime rate in their district. So they always do try and say, it's not such a big deal, just resolve it. Like, why do you want to file an FIR? Kuch hoga bhi nahi. And so then, to actually push them to say, no, this is my right. If an offense has been committed, it is my right in law that you have to register an FIR. You can't say no to me. That requires a sort of, you really have to fight with the police. And I think many people sort of lose out in that system. Once you do get into the system, you file a complaint. The next step is actually the police doing investigation. It's like what happens when somebody's house gets burgled, or like if you lose a phone. How many people actually expect the police to take action, right? We all register FIRs because you need to, so that there's no, you don't get caught in terms of some other scam that happens. But nobody really follows up with the police that, have you found it? Similarly, it's very difficult to follow up, and the police doesn't, again, have that incentive. It also is not the easiest thing in the world. They send out these IP notices, they send out notices to all your social media platforms and ask them for information about who is this account associated with. If it's an anonymous account, give us those details. And then they have to then take that next step. So it requires a constant involvement of the survivor, who becomes a complainant in the formal legal system, and to follow up. And then that's not even talking about what happens in trial, which stretches over years, where the cross-examination can get very ugly, where the accused sort of goes out on bail. Like even if you saw any of you who followed the Sully deals or the Bully Buy case, right? Eventually the accused does get released on bail. And so many people sort of lose heart in the system, and I actually do believe that more people should be out on bail rather than less, because I think we have a system of over-incarceration. But but that's a systemic problem, right? From an individual complainant's problem, I can see how you feel like, oh, everybody's getting out, what's the point of even pursuing this? So I think at all of those steps, we do feel the law goes short. The problem is not so much in the specific laws. I think one issue is maybe things like morphing are not specifically criminalized. Deep fakes, we've been seeing this problem of deep fakes. To me as a woman, this is generally like one of my biggest fears. Like it's just one of those things where you feel if the image is out there and if it's used in a pornographic manner, like what is going to happen. The government is apparently going to regulate that as well, but currently you don't have a specific offense for all of this, so you have to kind of do a lot of legal maneuvering to get an offense. But I mean, maybe we can discuss that later. But I think in terms of introduction, this should be more than enough.
Thank you. In fact, we said 5 to 7 minutes, and then we take three to 4 questions, and then maybe another 1 minute each to wrap up in the end. So yeah. So Neoma, right? So we wanted to really understand from you, from the students' perspective, since you are part of IIT and you're part of a student body. What are some of the issues, if in your formal or informal interactions with students? How deep is the problem? Like, what are some of the issues?
So, being a member of IGES and I recently became a member of IGES. So when my fellow PhD mates like PG students or even bachelors, those who know me personally, like not as an IGES member, and they would approach me, and these are all informal conversations that happen. If I'm in the canteen in the Kailash hostel, which is the girls' hostel, two students from bachelors, they approached me and they said that it was during the election season. So we have our election season in the month of April, which is for the, electing the general secretary for the student activity center board that we have. So all the boards that are under it, there's an election for that. And it is during the elections that the pages come up on Instagram. We are more than Facebook. Students are on Instagram these days. And especially during the election season, so many Instagram pages crop up. Like they're department wise, they are the board wise, the boards that are under SAC. And then these two girls they came to me when I was waiting for my food in the Kailash canteen, and they said, "Ma'am, dekho hamare upar ye meme bana hai. We are not even a part of the election. One of our friend is standing for the position, but just because we are his friends, they have made a meme on us, right?" And the thing is, while I agree that during the election season, no one is left behind. They make memes on everyone, like they don't, leave out the guys or the girls. But whenever there's a meme for women or girls, it's always sexual. It's always like there's never a decent meme for women or girls. So that April month is, and the before approaching the election month, that is the month of March. So March and April are like, you will see so many students, they, again, the question comes that they don't understand how severe this is. Should they even go to, we have IGES or ICC, so they don't understand how severe this is. If anything can be done about it, because it's online, it's a Instagram page. How will you track it? If you take down that page, then another page that will come up. So they're really confused as to if anything can be done. And then, as Julie said, that eventually they'll start participating in the social media, and then they'll start excluding themselves from Instagram, and they'll have a threshold for themselves. They'll post the things that they think would be appropriate, and they don't express their opinion as freely as they want to. And another case that comes to my mind is that it's a departmental case. So in the department, especially in the engineering, the departments under engineering, that is mechanical, civil, electrical, the heavy engineering departments, which have very low ratio. I mean, the ratio is skewed for men and women. So this, if there's a girl who is even remotely, who is beautiful according to the societal standards, there'll just be a meme about her. Like, it will be just a meme about her, and they'll post that meme on the department WhatsApp group, like the students that they have, like the student WhatsApp group, like the no professors are there. And they'll post that meme, and so this is something that happened. And the girl with whom it happened, she didn't understand the meme when it came on the group. and everyone, all the guys, kept saying hi and her name, hi and her name. And she just kept replying hi because she didn't understand the meme. And it was others who realized that, like, like she has no idea, she doesn't have the knowledge database that, there's something wrong going on and I shouldn't be replying, like I should call them out. So these are the things that happen, and yeah, students, they eventually, if not now, they'll start excluding them from the social media. They'll use it just for just to keep them keep up with the world, and that's it. And as Malvika said, that the offline and the online thing is real. So the memes that come up online, the effect of that takes place in the offline classrooms as well, right? And they'll call them with the names, and since it's sexual, it's very bad. These students, they don't know, once they got to know that I'm an IGES member, they said, "Ma'am, can anything, kuch ho sakta hai?" I'm like, please come and report it. It's good that you guys are recognizing it, that this is something wrong and it should be reported. So please come and report it so that we, as IGES also can come up with preemptive measures, right, during the election season. Like, let's say during the election seasons, we know that these things are going to come up, so we'll take some preemptive measures. So yeah, these are the cases that come up, and yeah, sure. So yeah, these are the cases that come up, and they're mostly in informal conversations. Yeah.
Can I just
Yes.
add 2 points to what you were saying, which was interesting. So actually this point that women are more often trolled, right? Like there are lots of studies about this. So there's a famous amnesty study where they looked at all women politicians and their interactions on Twitter. And basically you find that even amongst women, like it's the politicians, people who have opinions, right? Who are much more targeted than others. So I mean, it's a very interesting study to see kind of how women get targeted specifically, certain kinds of women, women like, opposition politicians much more, Muslim politicians much more, Dalits, so, minority sort of politicians much more. So this is a fact that's there, it's there throughout, and this is a problem. And we also just see this in this group, right? Like it's interesting, we're talking about gender violence, and the people who really need to be here are the men. But it's really the women who are here, who are experiencing it. And you see this everywhere, right? Like I have a son and a daughter. Everybody talks about, oh, raise your daughter in a strong way. But nobody talks about raising the sons, right, in a respectful way. So I really think it's also what society tells you. Oh, it's good to give like girls boyish toys, and like you should not have, like girls should not only play with Barbies, they should also play with Lego. But then nobody is really talking about guys playing with feminine toys. And I think it really does start from that level, that oh, these discussions are, very like women-centric. And the other point I also wanted to make on, maybe Malvika's already made it, I missed that, but when you talk about online, offline, it's also many people say, oh, what is the big deal? There was no physical violence. You weren't hurt, right? But the point is, it's the impact which is psychological, is very, very deep. And that is something that the law is taking into effect, but people have to take into effect as well. And like we as a society have to understand. So for instance, if you look at a nude selfie, it's not that when that image is shared, it's a privacy violation only. It's not just that, oh my god, my photo is out there in the public. But it's also, like many feminists talk about it, as a bodily integrity violation. I feel a certain sense of my bodily integrity being violated every time somebody is downloading a picture and seeing it. It's not just a privacy or a data issue. It's actually something much more intrinsic to us and to our bodies. And so I think like these are other problems. And I mean, I've been part of many POSH committees. And in a university context, it's even more contested because, young people, lots of hormones, etc. But the idea of consent, and people sort of just don't talk about that enough. And the one good thing I feel is that this generation is at least bringing up these issues much more than we did when we were in college. I think like we would have like one POSH case like in maybe 5 years, and it was like the talk of the town, right? And I think it's good if you're having many cases, because the point is there's always been violence. It's just that people are reporting it more. So I think that is one good thing.
Thank you so much. Just wanted to highlight 2-3 things before we open up for questions. One is that, it's not intentional that we are asking for examples from IIT, not to say that it's only happening here. It's we started with global and India level statistics, so it's happening globally and locally and also regionally. that. And the second is at UN Women, we are doing a lot of work on response, but a lot of work on prevention. That is, before violence happens, what are those things we need to do that really look at the root cause of violence, social norms, mindset change. But then the entire thing has to be long-term and long-standing, engaging with communities. These are important things because, that's why we are not reporting, because the kind of shame and stigma attached to it. A lot of times we are also not aware of, what does the law even have to do with it, right? So those are important things to note. Of course, we spoke of consent, very, very important. I think that's something which is very important in the kind of work we all do. So with that, if there are questions, if I could, call participants to come here and pose your question, please. Yeah. And also for colleagues who have joined online, if you can post questions and we can just see those. Thank you. Over to you, Piali, first.
Yeah, I think there is one question online, but yeah, I'll just take the advantage of being here. And also, my question is to you, and again, not because we are in IIT, is thank you for being so authentic and sharing what's happening. It's really, really important. But as Paulomi also mentioned about prevention, I think what any of a premier institute, I think it comes with a certain responsibility. And I would really say, ki, let's not, you're saying ki for the 2 months, it's not for that. I mean, who is standing for election? It's about mindset change. If it is serious, it has to be like a lot of work which should like really, really start. Like, can they stand for elections? If you, I mean, can a bystander complain about it? If you have heard it, can you complain about it? Because there's a lot of autonomous, decisions you can take as an institute. And what is the student body doing about it? I mean, it's not new. I mean, COVID, I mean, and we know globally, I mean, from after COVID, like the site of online violence have really, really gone up. And it has been during like, when people were asking for oxygens and and you were sharing your number, you were not that point careful about, revealing more about your identity, because at that point of time you just need an oxygen cylinder for your loved ones, and what you're getting is obscene photographs back. My question to you is, what are some of the steps as a student body that IIT is taking? If not now, what are your plans for the future? I mean, that's something, I mean, everybody would be interested to know. And thanks, Brinda, for talking about impact.
For steps, we have, last year on 6th September, we officiated, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, under which we have 4 verticals. We have IGIS, which is the Initiative for Gender Equity Sensitization. We have the Indradhanu, which is the Student Queer Collective. We have Initiative for Caste Equity and Social Justice, and Office of Accessible Education. So, being an IGIS member, whenever a complaint comes to me, I forward it to the, for every academic year we have a convener and a co-convener, and we have a consultant for IGIS, the senior consultant for IGIS. So I forward, like, that's my role, and I forward the complaint and to the conveners, to the apart from that, we have, as IGIS, we have been conducting sensitization workshops, like spread across the year, and for students, especially for bachelor students who are more actively involved in elections, and sensitizing them regarding the language that they use and how the elections should be, not just the elections as you said, but how they should conduct themselves, in their classrooms. And however, I have been part of those workshops. There hasn't been much focus on the online based violence that much. The focus has been more during the classrooms and off classroom, the spaces, the canteens, the playgrounds, on such. And if and definitely we there's from being members of IGES, we have our full support to the complainant, throughout the process, because it's a long process and they really lose hope. Like most of the students, they're like, "बहुत लंबा चल रहा है, let's just get over with it," because we have exams hai, assignments hai, there's so many things. They have classrooms from morning 8 o'clock, so they don't have that time. They don't have that time, and it takes a lot of mental energy as well. So the conveners, the senior consultants of IGES, and even as a student, like we provide them our full support throughout the process. And if there are more severe cases, we definitely direct them to the ICC. So we have the internal complaints committee, and we direct it to ICC, and then the committee that's there for ICC, they deal with the issues.
Yes, please. Can I also add to that? I think it boils down to a large extent to political will. And this is irrespective of whether you are at a national level, at an educational institutional level. What gender-based violence for so many years have shown is that there is no political will to deal with it. And so if you don't have the political will to make sure that your sensitization programs go beyond just sensitization, because all of us sitting here in this room who work on gender-based violence know that sensitization is one thing, but changing that into behavioral change is a much wider, and that gap is much more. So, and then expecting young adults to come at a university level and start addressing it without anything being referred to it at a school level. I mean, or at a family level. Nobody talks about it in your family. Nobody wants to stand up and take a stand when somebody else is going through. I think there have been organizations working on bystander interventions for so many years. So at the end of it, it comes down to a whole ecosystem that needs to change. And I think when Vrinda was talking about it, it comes down to power dynamics. At the end of it, you are not considered a woman or anybody else who has intersectional identities are not seen as a person in their own right with the full rights that a male member of the society would have. And this whole idea of privilege. I am male, I am, तू तो आँख का तारा है, तू तो मेरी अर्थी जलाएगा, तू ये वंश को आगे बढ़ाएगा, and everything then gets linked to the whole idea of son preference. I need a son because I know that I can't survive without a son. So this whole idea of changing those power imbalances also to a certain extent, both mindset, behavior and laws, policies, everything, it's a package. And I think that package, that ecosystem needs to be addressed holistically in some ways. Thanks.
Yeah, so totally, we are all coming from patriarchal systems where a lot of this is part of it, and a lot of work has been done on the ecological model where you're looking at individual families, communities, states, and the interconnectedness between who's doing what and how are things getting impacted. So we have an online question, and then we come to here. Yeah. So we have around 20 more minutes. So okay. So this is a question on asking for a solution. Basically, how can technology be, a tool to address this issue? Now, how do you think this could be regulated? This could be, I'm assuming, online violence. The issue of data set is indeed serious. What do you think can be done from an engineer's perspective? Who are people building such machines? So before I pass it to the panel, just wanted to say that UN Women has developed, a chatbot. Also we have apps which is trying to address information gap for anybody who's facing any kind of violence. So that's one example. But yeah, over to.
I mean, the whole problem is the fact that there is no single jurisdictional legal system that kind of holds tech companies accountable. I think Maldika might share a lot more about how difficult it is to take down content and the rigmarole that one has to go through. In terms of a solution, I mean, definitely more women need to be in the whole system of designing, applying it, and obviously also challenging stereotypes now with AI, because the data sets that are being introduced into this design and application is very gendered. So one has to break that. One also has to do a gender, potentially one should do a gender assessment, a human rights impact assessment of whatever technology that is being developed. But let's also face it that tech companies are in it for profit. So how do you hold them accountable is something that needs to be thought about. I think the Global Digital Compact is supposed to be a system that kind of thinks about all of this. A little skeptical because we do have a lot of frameworks, but how much of it does get implemented on the ground, that becomes the bigger challenge.
Thank you. To quickly just address this, I think what we've seen across the globe is that most of the AI systems have already been made using pre-existing data sets with inherent biases in them. An example of racial bias is when Google came out with their photo recognition system, anyone with a darker shade of skin were instantly recognized as gorillas. That's the sort of result it came out with. Amazon, for instance, when it had its hiring AI model, fed such data into it that anytime a woman, and anyone who was not a man, anyone who was recognized with any other pronouns came in, they were instantly rejected. And anytime, very interestingly, if a man who played chess was there in the CV, it was an instant promotion. So, I mean, that's the other side, for instance. So I would say the question was specifically on like data and the sort of data that's being fed into all these systems. I would say that now globally there's a move for AI regulation that is happening, and that's something that India is going to come up with through proposed legislations which are sort of in the air right now. We also don't know what exactly is coming under the Digital India Act. Later there will be other regulations coming for AI, but we have to look at 4 aspects here. One is the design of it, starting from the getting the data, using the data, and due diligence after the data. That sort of thematic is there internationally. Second is regarding updation. Sometimes what happens is you build something off a certain model, but then that sort of, I mean, there's a lot of talk about this concept called AI consciousness, where things will evolve on its own. But if that happens, where what happens later to the sort of information that we get, like there are a lot of religious AIs that are out there, and that sort of scares me because they're based off, again, religious texts of a particular religion, but at the same time, you can ask these sort of questions about your mental health and get a response which is very dangerous to your own life. So how do we have to have some sort of regulation for this, and I think India's coming up with it. I see that there's a move for it, but globally also everyone's trying to figure it out. Whenever EU comes out with anything, everyone starts copying it, the Brussels effect as they call it, but we are slowly going there. I also just quickly want to, because so much talk happened before, in most of these institutions, whether institutions against journalists, I just wanted to say that there's a sort of aggressive troll mentality that exists online, where you see one hateful comment about someone and then you have 1,000 people resharing it. Platforms itself, by design, are made to perpetuate violence. And that is why it's so good that we can finally hold them accountable over time. Again, it's not like you instantly hold them accountable and they get penalized. There are checks and balances from both ends. But it's very important because it is inherent toxic masculinity that's there on these sites. Be it against someone like me who's, let's say, not a public political figure, or someone who is a public political figure. IT for Change also did a study where we found out that those who were, regardless of what sort of political dispensation they had, they were trolled. And the thing is, gender-based hate speech is not a thing. Hate speech in India is seen in a very specific legal lens, and if you get attacked or if you get targeted for your gender, it's not considered at all. And thirdly, I just wanted to say, in law, there's a big issue of recognizing the online as a public sphere. Like we see you were talking about classrooms, you're talking about spaces outside classrooms. This is because people don't see the online as a space, as a public space. It is. And that it's about time we started thinking of it as another world in itself. You have metaverse worlds now. But that is a very inherent problem with all sorts of sensitizations, trainings that exist also. Just wanted to add that quickly and not interrupt anyone. Thank you.
So we take the question first.
I mean, there's nothing more to say.
Yeah. So can you come here? Yeah. Sudesh. Please the camera.
So yeah, first of all, thank you so much to the entire panel for having such authentic discussion. So I just had a question for Brinda, and thank you so much for bringing up the topic for Dalit women, because I think we did not really talk about it, like how the Dalit women are being subjected to sexual violence in India, because we know how our society works. Even though we talk about caste system doesn't exist anymore, we don't follow it, but we know how it has been there into our society, and it's still there eminently in urban area as well as in rural area. So I was reading this report some time back, I think it was under the National Crime Bureau report, where it says that every day 10 Dalit women are being raped as compared to the UCs. So I just wanted to understand, Rinda, from a legal point of perspective, basically, that is there any particular law, like a frame of law, which is kind of trying to safeguard or protect the integrity of Dalit women as compared to UCs? Because clearly we can see that Dalit women are subjected to sexual violence more as compared to UCs. I'm not taking any sides here, but at the same time we know what's the reality on ground. So is there a legal framework, or we could look at it where Dalit women's integrity is being taken care of, particularly by law, which is not kind of overlapping UCs? So just wanted to understand your point on it. Thank you.
I mean, it comes maybe in two ways. So one, you obviously have the SC/ST Offences Act, which is that you can't, using caste terminology against somebody is an offence in law. So there is a whole law that deals specifically with crimes against scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, where intention sort of becomes relevant, right? And the law is actually framed pretty strictly. You're actually not allowed to get anticipatory bail under the law. Like, there's no provision to apply for anticipatory bail. So one, there is a law. I don't know how much there is knowledge about the law, but I think, again, in a power structure, the question is not so much knowledge, it's that it would be difficult to file a case. If you're a Dalit woman and you have to file a case, it's always harder. So the issue is not so much the law, it's actually like going and filing a case in court. I mean, every day you read the news about sort of people being burned, Dalit people being burnt, or, for doing some, for daring to enter into a public place. So I think the issue is not so much the law, it's actually the implementation. In terms of other specific laws, so honor killings are now recognized in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court passed a bunch of judgments that is now recognized that, khap panchayats have no legal basis. They should not be listened to, because, honor killings again often happen in an inter-caste or an inter-religious setting. Like, it's those two settings where we see the kind of largest number of honor killings. And the Supreme Court has passed various judgments about this. They've passed judgments on lynching, saying, they shouldn't be there. The law doesn't discriminate in terms of like, it's a rape. It doesn't matter who the victim is. You would use it in terms of showing mens rea, so intention. Like, you could use it in proving the case. So it's not that the offense is separate, but the way you would prosecute it, you would say that this was apart from just gender violence, it was also caste-based violence, right? So, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, isn't Bhavari Devi and Mathura, like that was also caste violence. So you would use it in the way of framing like why the motivation. So apart from just so it would come in the prosecution of the case, but not in the substantive offense, if that makes sense.
And there is a draft law on honor killings right now. I
Yeah.
don't think it has been presented. I don't think it has been presented in Parliament, but groups working on caste-based violence and sexual violence have worked towards creating this draft law, and I think they have had consultations across the country, and I'm hoping that it will be tabled at some point of
I
time.
think the bigger problem is that we just don't know.
Exactly.
I mean, people don't know enough about, like, because all our spaces are so casteist, right? Like, you don't have as many, people don't know as many Dalit activists and leaders. Like, they are not mainstream. So in the circle, sort of, they're very well known. But I think, like, when we were doing that consultation, we really were trying to make an effort to not get the normal, like, standard people.
Yeah, so sometimes which also happens, and which is the case, and it's not only in developmental conversations like this, but the onus of talking about a particular issue comes on a particular individual or a particular group who are working with a certain kind of vulnerable societies, working on certain issues. It can be disability, it could be LGBTQI rights, it could be elderly, it could be gender-based violence. So whenever there is an issue on disability, you will always. So that's also part of the picture. I really wanted to invite you on stage with your question, please. Yes, thank you.
I didn't have a question. I actually just wanted to
No
add
comment
to what
is
you
fine.
were saying about the student body. So maybe I'll just start by introducing myself. I am
You
the
have to face the camera.
Oh, okay. I'm actually the convener of IGES. I'm a faculty member here in the Department of Applied Mechanics. Firstly, my apologies for the low participation. I hope you. So we've finished our exams, and most of our students have left, and faculty have not shown up because we are sort of in the middle of grade moderation and PhD interviews and all sorts of things, right? So that's one of the reasons why, despite sending several reminder emails, but we have maybe about 20 people on the live stream. Hopefully, in future when we collaborate, we would have more people joining these events. So yeah, and thanks again for showing up. Hopefully, we'll be able to reach out through online means, and some of the material that Shreya has shared with me, at the end of it, we will make sure that we send out the material, and maybe if it is possible, we could get some video snippets and then share that with the audience. Okay, so mainly what I wanted to say is that what student body here is doing, the question was raised about what student body here is doing about addressing some of these issues. And at that point, the reality is that student body in itself has very little power, to be honest. Even we as members of IGES, the Initiative for Gender Equity, which is essentially the gender cell here at IIT Delhi, or the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, we keep trying to use milder measures to bring more people in, because we face a very serious issue of heavily skewed gender population, right? I mean, the women are a very small fraction of the men in this institute. So all the issues that have been raised, multiplied by a factor, and the fact that while Neova has been kind enough to say that we have had interactions, she comes to me and she reports some of these cases, and my suggestion always comes out to be, let the student come and just talk to me informally. I'm not even talking about taking a complaint forward, but none of them actually show up, right? So the reality is that I think some of the complaints may come as far as a student member, but it never even comes higher above if it is a serious offense, right? And most of the times, if it is just online, it doesn't get out. If it's online, which then translates into a very serious bullying case or harassment, more serious harassment type of cases, that's when we immediately file a complaint with ICC. And even then it becomes, if it's a he said, she said sort of situation, then, maybe an action never gets taken. But we are trying. That's all I can say, right? I mean, we are conducting these sessions, awareness sessions. And today I was hoping that I could get more feedback and more suggestions from the panelists on what we can do, we at IGES can do, to streamline the process. Especially online, one of the biggest issues with online-based violence is, how do we bring such people out, right? What's the appropriate punishment? Because I think, as one of you had very correctly pointed out, there's a threshold, right? So when is the threshold? It's very personal, right? I mean, some people get hurt at a certain level, and then some of us have probably a higher threshold. And so what is it, what should be that threshold where, we tell the students to act on it, right? And how can we encourage more students to act on it? How can we encourage more participation, right? So these are some of the issues that we have been dealing with. So I look forward to any suggestions on these.
Thank you. I think this threshold is consent.
Yeah.
You know, if you are, if you do not want it, you need to call it out, or make a complaint, talk to someone, have safe spaces around you. The onus of violence prevention is not on the person who's facing the violence. I think where we are coming from, we all believe that community spaces, educational institutions, even public spaces, online spaces, as part of it, they have to provide a safer world for all of us to be there. And definitely women and girls, because we started with the statistics and you know how it is. So, but I'd love to hear from, so Malavika first and then others. Thanks.
I just wanted to, I know I was talking about some of the online violence concepts, but we've done some digital security trainings specifically on law and sensitization of online violence with B.Ed students in Karnataka between the ages of 22 to 27. And I was involved in some of these, and there are adolescent programs also, but in this particularly, there was a on the issue you raised on the gender issue being skewed, there was a similar situation there, where any time the women did get the strength and the knowledge to actually come forward and file the complaint, the senior educational men would shut it down. Because there was a little boys club over there. So what finally happened was we had this sort of brainstorming session where they were trying to see what can be done, because like you rightly mentioned, the onus is mostly on the survivor to actually come. So bystander intervention programs are really essential in these. That's one solution that the students themselves came up with, because it's easier for a friend to come forward and give all details, and a trusted friend for that matter, or a trusted parent or a colleague, etc. But apart from that, there was this, they did try an anonymous system complaint method, but what finally happens is that when there are lack of details in these anonymous complaints, you can't really take them forward. So that's the challenge there. But apart from that, they all brainstormed to come up with a sort of tech intervention where there would be a sort of online complaints portal, which allows for anonymity, degree of detail, and it would also have the range of issues that you could complain about. I think sometimes there's a lot of sociological, psychological factors. There's fear, there's stigma, there's a power imbalance. Just the thought of going against your professor or going against a senior, a fifth year, is really scary because you're just starting out. And most of the time, in most of the studies that we've also seen, you have a sort of age difference with the power imbalance too that comes out. So all these are really effective interventions that they also came up with and they've implemented. So I think using tech is very important here, and it can be done. So just wanted to mention.
So just a time check, it's 4:30, so we'll give 1 minute each to the three of you.
Yeah, I think, the only other thing I would add up, I think Malvika's kind of answered all of the important points, but maybe it's also everybody, these are long-term changes, so people seeing that there is an institutional culture where women's complaints are taken seriously. This will not happen one at a time. It will happen over time when you escalate things faster to the ICC, when you yourself will take action, because what you're seeing is the fear to come to you, right? Because they feel either confidentiality will not be maintained, there'll be some sort of retaliation, and that will only come through over time, taking very proactive action and taking strict action and making sure confidentiality is maintained, making sure there is no retaliation. And that is a longer term, not a quick fix solution, but I think that's what changes culture. And that's what allows women to come forward and complain, and then, that's a cycle.
As Suprabham said, our convener, that we are trying, the professors, the faculty members of IGES, they are trying at their level, and we students, we try, at our own level during informal conversations or over at tea, and our motto is recognize it and report it. While I agree that the onus is on the survivor more, but our allies, the friends, the bystanders, just if you recognize it, please report it. That's how the best thing I can work.
Just 30 seconds. I just wanted to say it's very difficult to say no means no and really put it out there. And this is across all kinds of spectrums, including education institutions, posh, workplace scenarios. Secondly, not just women's issues, as it's been covered, so it's very important to bring this in the sensitization training. And go beyond gender also. It's time we looked at it beyond a cis woman's issue too. Sometimes that really gets ignored and sidelined. And it's important to have informational context, like for instance, educational space information, online violence here. But language and regional context is highly essential with these trainings. And sometimes it's really forgotten. So that's the thing. And finally, a space to come forward, as you rightly put up.
My additions to it would be, it is tough to have political will, but it is not impossible. You need to find those champions, and people become champions with different reasons. Sometimes it's really personal to them because somebody in their family has gone through it. And so therefore they understand the pain and the process, and so therefore they want to right that wrong. So finding those champions, nurturing those champions, making sure that you are kind of sharing things with them, and if they are in positions of power, using their influence to be able to bring about change is quite important. I think I'll add one more point to what Vrinda was saying, that when you're dealing with cases, definitely confidentiality, the process itself, if you're not being able to demonstrate to a survivor that that process is fair, it is sensitive, it is inclusive, you've lost the battle already. So the trust, actually, more than anything else. So being able to do that. The other thing that has really helped, at least with the POSH Act, is when there is, it's not mandatory reporting of what has happened, but mandatory reporting of how many cases, how many are pending, how many have been resolved, and what are the main kind of things, which is what your annual report you have to give. It has taken a long time, but now you can see that it's finally sunk in that you have to share this out publicly, whether it starts off as tokenism and then it starts building as something more stronger. But that kind of an accountability back to the students also, to say, look, there is this committee in place, we've dealt with so many cases or so many informal complaints, and making those divisions, these are formal complaints, informal complaints, we've had so many, and giving that kind of information also helps in, at times, being able to get the trust, and telling women or other intersectional identity people that this is a safe space, step in, and then we can take it forward.
Thank you. So, one suggestion on behalf of UN Women is that we provide institutional training on online violence. So, what are the types of violence, what are some of the legal provisions, what are some of the steps you can take, and that's not only for students, it could be for faculty, it could be for support staff, it could be anybody, whoever is in the campus who needs to know. So very happy for you to reach out, and we could do that. And on that note, thank you so much, all the panelists and the participants who are present here. Thank you for a fruitful discussion, and more to come. Thank you.
Yes. So you wanted me to thank you.
Oh, so sorry, I have another conference at 5 o'clock. So sorry, I've short-circuited this entire thing.
It's okay. Please. She has to do the closing.
you so much. Thank you to all of the panelists for their very engaging discussion, providing such constructive feedback and for keeping it informal. I'd like to request all of you to come to the stage so we can felicitate you individually. Starting with maybe moderator, Paul Mima.
Could be a co-organizers. Thank you so much. Thank you.
With Julie. Malvika. And Niova for bringing the lived experiences to life. It was a very interesting discussion, especially I would like to end it on a note of hope. What we discussed about this generation bringing up more and more cases, and the fact that more reportage is actually good, because violence has always existed, it's just been existing under a culture of silence. And I think it's time that we all speak up, we do our bit, and we create a better, a safer world. This 16 days, as you know, we are calling for greater investment to prevent violence against women and girls. Today's discussion was one part of our campaign. We also have a pledge that we invite all of you to take. We want you to voice your commitment, to speak and to act against gender-based violence. Our rallying call is Ab Koi Bahana Nahi. And today, while we spoke about creating safe digital spaces, and in fact recognizing that the digital is also a space, this really ties in with our work at UN Women. We have our initiative for safe cities and safe spaces, where we stress the need to implement interventions that prevent and respond to sexual harassment. In line with that, we have collaborated with UNESCO and UNHCR on a photo competition that explores this idea of a safe space and how it can mean different things to different people. So I invite everybody here to show us their vision of what a safe space is. You can scan the QR codes on the back of the brochures for more information. And on an ending note, I think it was very important that this discussion about technology-facilitated violence happened at an institute that is technologically oriented. Because so many times when we discuss human rights violations and how tech is giving them newer forms and how it's making the scale and the reach of these violations far wider that we can cope with, there's a lot of resistance in the industry, and a lot of people see it as, we're attacking them and they get defensive. But the truth is that ultimately those who are working in the technological field and those who are working in the development space are driven by the same belief. We're driven by a belief in a better world. And that's why I'm so thankful to IIT Delhi for collaborating with us on this, and especially to Professor Sushma, to Nargis, to Raki, to the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, specifically the IGIS, for being so supportive and dealing with all of our requests. I would also like to take this opportunity to once again thank all of our panelists. Thank you for being here, taking time out of your schedule, and also extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Ending Violence Against Women program team here at UN Women, specifically Paulami and Piali. Your guidance and your vision are the things that have made this discussion possible. Many thanks also to all of my colleagues from the communications team, and I would request everybody to join us outside for some tea and snacks, and also some group photos. Thank you. And also thank you to everybody who was joining us online. Have a nice day.